Hi, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Cassie. If you haven't been here before, I'm really excited for you to hear this podcast, and I welcome your thoughts. Like maybe at points we do speak a little bit, like we're on one, but we mean it with the utmost respect to all mothers. Really, motherhood is hard. Birth is, a big thing. So we kind of unpack like a 0.01% of that today. My guest Isabel we met like way before when she was in marketing and we kind of hit it off. I think she did one of my astrology courses at one point. She's so great and she is now a birth mentor. You'll see why she is so exceptional and different. And obviously because I love all things motherhood, birth and natural, it only seemed right that we should get together and do this podcast again. If you can hear funny noise in the background, that's my 16-month-old toddler Bonnie. She's having her bath. I'm trying to just get this podcast out because we're off to see Nick Mulvey tomorrow, so I won't be kind of like working. Can have a night away from the baby, little Bonnie. She's going to be staying at her grandma's. She's going to be at nursery all day, then grandma will pick her up, and then she's going back to nursery in the morning. So I'm hoping that she'll settle okay. But worst things worse is, I go and pick her up the next day and she has a short Thursday. But it can be challenging with the little ones, especially when you are trying to change up the routine and test, how, like she's not going to get picked up by me. But hopefully she'll be happy with her grandma. We'll see. But this concert is going to be insane. If you're a Nick Mulvey fan, that's who I'm going to see. If you're not a Nick Mulvey fan, you need to be. He's incredible. You love him. Anyway, that's what this podcast is about today. Please don't forget that I primarily work with homeopathy to support and educate women how to use homeopathy to heal themselves first, then their family, to have a thriving pregnancy, birth, and postpartum using homeopathy, which is an incredible natural form of energy medicine, or it's medicine really. It's kind of like, we talk about how it actually works more on my Instagram page, in my podcasts. You can listen to my other podcast episode if you're new to the podcast to get an understanding of how powerful and life-changing homeopathy can be. But it's medicine that precisely instructs your body how to heal itself. So instead of just pushing symptoms down, it creates healing from the inside out. So when it comes to birth, it can turn around the course of your birth, it can turn babies, it can move unproductive contractions into contractions, it can make you heal quicker, it can get your retained placenta out quicker, it can stop a back labour feeling so bad, it can help you in transition, it can help you weeks before birth to prep for an easy, effortless birth. It's labour, so it's never going to be easy, but for everything to move in the right direction. It can help you with milk supply, mastitis, helps baby with colic, eczema, basically any issue you have. Homeopathy is the world's second largest system of medicine. It's a full system. It has a remedy for everything. So if you would like support with homeopathy, you can get lots of free content on my Instagram page at Flourish with Cassie. If you feel that you need one-to-one support to help you emotionally, physically or mentally in your pregnancy, if you're having issues in your birth, if you're having trouble with your baby, your children, then reach out to me. I can support you with homeopathy. So please don't be a stranger. If something in you is like, I need to find out more about this, you can either drop me an email, reach out to me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram, all of those things. But anyway, let's go to the podcast. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Please follow Isabel, follow me, like the podcast, give it a 5-star rating if you review. And I need to sort my toddler out. Oh, she wasn't in the bath on her own, by the way. My partner's with her. Just put that out there before someone sends the social services round to my house. All right. See you soon. Enjoy the podcast.
Account. So I feel like every time I start a new one, I'm just like, do I just seem like some weird, creepy person that's like just hopping around, just trying to disguise myself? But I don't know. We kind of like talked about human design a little bit the last time we talked, and I've been looking into it a whole lot more. So I'm a manifesting generator, which basically means like I get into so many different things. And the cool part about it is like with my profile type, which is a 4-6, apparently whenever I get to 30, that's when I'm supposed to just like figure it out. And I'm 28 now. And I'm like starting to come to that point where I'm like, okay, I really know what I can do. And then the cool thing is all the little things that I've done along the way, like the marketing and then like the mom blog and all the little things have all come together to help me with this one thing, which is cool. So
It makes sense. I don't know, like, how much you know, like, because I'm a projector, so it's like there is no spare energy, and like I literally have no energy for anything that's inauthentic. But I think that's true for manifesting generators because you kind of like, okay, but I don't think you must have the same spark things. I don't know. I don't know much about you.
Yeah, I actually, well, my oldest is a projector. So I'm trying to learn a little bit more about how that works. And I mean, it's all just very fascinating. It's, we definitely, I need that spark of motivation, but it just kind of like comes to me. So it's not so much like an invitation, but just like a instant sort of spark in my brain. And I'm like, I have to do this now. And then I do it. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
I do. Yeah. It's weird because I do get sparks. Like that was I got a spark with homeopathy. I do get that, but it's maybe feels different. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, it's all interesting, but yeah.
So, do you want to introduce yourself? Because we came on the podcast before, but it's different now.
Yeah. It's very different.
And somehow end in parallel again.
I know.
Okay, so
it feels like a full circle moment because I feel like the last time I was on here, I was doing marketing and branding, and now I'm doing nothing of the sort, and I am in birth. So basically, I'm still sort of navigating how I can show up for women in birth. And just the whole range of pregnancy and postpartum. And I'd love to be able to help with fertility as well. But at the moment, I'm really diving into birth mentorship. So basically, I don't know if I want to be a birth witness. I feel like that's such a personal moment. And it's really hard for myself to feel like I'm that person that can be a part of that moment for other people. But the preparation that goes into actually creating a birth that you enjoy, that's not traumatic, that you feel in control of, is something that I don't think a lot of women have access to. And it's just those kinds of systems that you can put in place to actually plan for a birth that you love, plan for a postpartum you love. I'm really good at creating those systems. So that's where the mentorship comes into play, where it's like, I want women to have the birth that they really deserve, that they can really, that I believe that they can have. So yeah, so that's basically what I'm working on building right now, is just a way to sit down with women and talk to them about what they want and give them actionable, realistic steps to actually getting there. So birth mentor.
Birth mentor. Well, maybe we could circle back like even a bit more to, because the whole concept, like your Instagram handle is your wild birth. So most people don't know really what that means, because they might think, oh, it's just, a free birth or a home birth, like, or might not really know what free birth means. But actually, what is that? What define wild free birth? Like, what is that?
Yeah. So, well, I would say my sort of use of the term wild birth is really just to say that we're going back to us as women, as the birthing woman, being the authority in our birth. And, it's wild because a lot of people are viewed as very wild people for choosing that. But at the same time, it's also just going back to the roots of what birth is supposed to be, because it is a sensation in your body that no one else can feel. No one else can actually know what's going on. So to really become wild within it is just to take it back, put it back in your body, take it out of the hands of the external, authorities, and allow yourself to fully engage in it and become really wild within it. But then I'm also a huge advocate for free birth. I'm planning on having one in October, which is like wild. It is wild. It's crazy and exciting. And for that, it's really just birthing unassisted without having hands on you, without having people engaged in the process where you're fully the authority. And really, the definition of free birth sits within each woman. Like some people will have a midwife there, but the midwife will be totally hands off and they'll call it a free birth. Some people will go to the ocean all by themselves and birth, and that's definitely a free birth, I would say. So I don't like to define it for other people, but for me personally, it just means that I will be birthing on my own without the presence of a professional.
Very nice. And I think a lot of women are really scared of this because we live in a society where pretty much from the moment we're born, we're like hijacked to live in our neocortex or not really in our primal brain. And I guess, like society sets us up from this from day one and, makes us think that birth is like some kind of illness. It's like you go to the hospital and it's like halfway through my birth, I was started to be treated like it was an illness. And I know, like I was still like, I'd done a lot of prep and I was very much like, I did let go into the process. And for me, it was very like free in the sense that I told everyone to just basically get away from me because you know what to do instinctually. And maybe non-birthing women kind of who haven't given birth yet, like maybe think, oh, how do you know? And it's probably, let me tell you,
you can't not know.
It's like taking the biggest shit of your life. But I kind of like think like the problem is not even, I don't think women even know that they have the choice to free birth. Like, you get pregnant, you phone the doctors, and then bang, you're in the system. And it's like, could we pause? Like, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah. No, that's definitely, and I think, a lot of people like to say that's by design. The system is just kind of set up in this way where it is just the place to go. And that was me for my first two births that I've gone through. And, especially with my first one, I just did whatever the doctor said. I was like, okay, yeah, you know best. I don't know. This is my first baby. I've never done this before. I don't know what the sensations are going to be. So it really is hard to kind of unlearn. And even with, when I got pregnant with my third earlier this year, I was still like, home birth, that's crazy. Like, why would you birth at home? It's so dangerous. Like, you don't have anyone there. And I was in that mindset of the hospital is the choice. And I think, to get out of that, I think is just to hear other alternatives, but they have to be available. And they're not very available right now. Most people that I talk to, when they tell people they're going to have a home birth, I just like had a whole discussion with a bunch of people, just earlier today on this, but you just get met with horror stories. You get met with, oh my gosh, how could you? Like, why would you do that to your baby? So, it's just, we've been in the system for so long. Generations of women have just gone to the doctor. It's really been around since, I want to say, it's been very popular since the early 1900s that we've been going to the hospital, letting the doctors decide what's going to happen. And there's actually been documentation from doctors like way in the 1800s that are like, we need to make them afraid of the pain of birth and then convince them that birth is dangerous, so they choose us every time. And like, there's actual like letters written, from like big medical professionals way back in the day that's really what they tried to do. So I think it's really just, we've lost the connection. And you see it through more than just birth. We've lost the connection to even believing we can raise our kids, even believing that we know how to feed ourselves or that our bodies know how to heal themselves. We just think, oh, well, if it's at the grocery store, it must be good for us. Or, oh, if the doctor is prescribing this medication, it must be good for me. And that belief that we are actually intelligent enough to take care of ourselves, to birth our children, is completely gone. It's been lost. And I think we're getting it back. but it'll take time.
Yeah, I think because it's these things are instinctual. Like if the events of the last 2 years haven't taught us anything, surely at some point your instinct goes like something's maybe not right here. So I
Right.
think it's the problem is like when you start to question things, you start to question everything, and that's not it's not a comfortable position to be in, is it? And even like talking about the grocery store, like we get we have like baby snacks in the UK, where like sometimes it's just easy to give them a baby snack, but then you look at the ingredients and you're like like all the bad oils, and like I'm not saying there's not a place, it's just like could we just use like olive oil in the snack? Could we just use butter? Like what? And even like our meat, like it's better in the UK, but like I know in the US, like the meat is just, it's like everything is really badly farmed, and you have to pay through your nose. So I think the problem, like you say, we can sit here and blame the system, but at the same time, it's at this point where I guess if you get pushed so far, at some point you do kind of like start to question that, and maybe that's why the movements now that are like in the opposite direction of just like kind of reclaiming your sovereignty in whatever way it is are so powerful. And I think it starts with birth, because birth isn't like anything else. It's not the same as your nutrition, it's not the same as, I don't know, I mean, schooling your kids is big, but when it comes to your children and the process of birth, that is the most close you will ever come to God. And I think because it's on that vibration, anything that interferes with it, it just becomes like, it's almost like in homeopathy, we call it like there's nature giving energy, but then there's the opposite of nature, which is self-destruction. It's like a whole kind of energy that there is. And it's like when we start to mix and match with birth and like mess with it, and there is a place for it in life-saving situations. I wouldn't say, oh, just whatever, but it's like when we start to mess with it, that's when the problems start happening. Like for example, induction. Were you induced with your first baby?
I had a membrane sweep, so they don't tell you that it's induction, but there's a slew of risks that come with it that they don't tell you about.
Yeah.
And objectively, the contractions are horrible. I mean, they come on really fast. They come on really strong.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like completely unproductive. I mean, unproductive, some people don't like that word, but it was like the pain without any progress. And I mean, to go back to, one of your previous points, like we can't blame the system. That is true. I think the system is working as it's intended. And to try and change the system is, I believe, a fruitless endeavor. I mean, it's bigger than all. I mean, it's so much bigger than us. But at the same time, it doesn't control us as much as we think it does. I mean, like I don't have to consistently only buy processed food from the grocery store. I don't have to go to the hospital to birth. I don't, there's all these things that I don't have to do. And I think it's really hard for people to realize, like, oh, I can just totally make these choices for myself. And yes, there's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of social pressure that will make us feel like we have to continue to indulge in the systems available to us, but we really don't. So, that's the first big thing that I really try and help people see is like, you don't have to fight.
No.
Just do something different. Just do what feels best to you and just accept the responsibility of those outcomes.
Exactly.
And then, that does kind of lead into, when you do engage in a system that is so anti-nature, whether it's afraid of nature or just doesn't like nature, I don't know. It's not for me to know, that's for them to know, but it messes with the process, and it gives the appearance that birth is broken, not that the system is broken. And induction is really one of those huge topics because it comes in really sneaky. I mean, with the membrane sweep, I was basically just told at my appointment, like, this will just help things to move along. It's not really an induction. It's just a very natural form of just, making things happen. If they're going to, they didn't tell me anything about risk of infection, risk of the waters breaking, risk of anything. And that happens so often with induction. And then when you start introducing like the actual drugs into it, Pitocin, I mean, Pitocin, a risk of Pitocin is postpartum hemorrhage. And then the way to help postpartum hemorrhage is with Pitocin. So they're like creating these problems that they then have to solve. And so then a woman goes in, maybe she gets the membrane sweep, maybe she starts labor, maybe it's unproductive, maybe it goes too long. I'm using quotations for anyone that's not, too long. And then they use Pitocin to speed things up. And then she hemorrhages, and then they save her life with Pitocin. And then she's walking away with the story that she would have died without the system. And then that's the narrative that we get told over and over and over again. Like, you get diagnosed with an ultrasound with a big baby, which ultrasounds are notorious for being off by like 2 pounds either way. And big babies are not the primary cause of shoulder dystocia with it, which is, the baby getting stuck. And yet you get told this, then you have a C-section because your baby's too big. And then, you feel like you and your baby were saved because you don't know what would have happened if you would have said no. And you're sitting there in the doctor's office and they're telling you, you have to do this. If you don't do this, you could die, your baby could die. And no one wants a dead baby. But there has to be another way. And how could we have so many people on this earth at this point in time if we can't birth without the system? Because we've been doing that longer than we've been birthing with the system. So it's all just a jumbled up mess of theories and reasons and like social proof that just continues to prove the narrative that our bodies are broken, despite the fact that most people don't even try the alternative at this point. So we can't really know.
Yeah. I mean, induction is like, really messes with things. Like, we had the same, but it was like she was so small. And I was like, and then they were saying, but you're small, so we're not worried. And also, scans are incorrect. However, we still think you should have an induction. So I managed to like push it off until like 41 weeks. And I was like, look, if you just get off my back, like if she's not here by Friday, fine, whatever, I'll come for an induction. Because at this point, I'd been like beaten down so much that she was basically going to die. Yeah. And when you're like, it's your first baby, I do think it's different. Like, you have no idea. But even though I was going in, I was actually having like regular contractions. I had fertility acupuncture and it really did work. So I was having like regular contractions and I was like, I know this is happening now. And I thought, well, I'll go in, but they'll probably tell me to come home because like everything's happening. Before I could even speak to anyone, I was like an inpatient. Before I'd even been seen, I was like, what the fuck? Like, and the minute I got to hospital, my contractions stopped. Like, I didn't feel good. I didn't like the room. I was like, this isn't a place for birthing. This is like the place where my mum died. Like, this isn't, it was so fucked up. And the minute they put the gel on, because you have it's like we have a gel in the UK that's like the first thing they use, and it was like everything just the same, was too fast, out of control, and the whole leg was just fast, furious, completely out of control, to the point where I literally thought I was dying. And I don't think, like, I know birth is going to be fucking painful, but what I experienced felt bigger than my body, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's because it was unnatural. I mean, your body is made to regulate your contractions, and it's actually communicating with your baby, because through every contraction, baby's not getting oxygen because everything's getting squeezed. So that's why you have the breaks. That's why contractions aren't just like these crazy, like, I mean, that's what the point of the pain is to like help your body to know, like, I need to slow down. I can pick up, whenever you have that unnatural labor that started, nothing is being regulated by the entity that is doing the work, which is your body. Your body is no longer regulating it. Now the doctors who have
No idea.
no idea what's going on, now they're regulating it. They're giving you more doses and they're trying to speed things up because they know what they're doing is dangerous. So they want to do it as quickly as possible. And yeah, and so then you're just left with this horrific view of childbirth that really does not have to be the norm.
No. And
Yeah.
for sure, like for me, the minute that happened, I felt was bigger than my body. Like they left me for like, just left me, like didn't even see how I was getting on, which is just a fucking mess anyway. I wanted to be, I don't want to be like touched. I just wanted to be held in the space, like with someone that's just like, I'm here. That's it. That's
Right.
all I personally need.
Well, if they're going to administer this stuff, you want them to watch you to make sure you're okay.
And it was like, it was just horrendous. So in the end, it was more just a case of like, I just got on with it, and it was completely unmedicated, but it was big time pain. And I don't think it would have been maybe quite like that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, it probably would not have been. I mean, I can pretty confidently say that if you were to give birth again without the medication to move things along, it will probably actually, like, because this is kind of what happened with between my first and my second. Even though I was in the hospital, I really didn't have a lot of prenatal care with my second because we moved a lot during that pregnancy. It was just a lot of, personal stuff. So just never really had the opportunity to go to an OB regularly, but in a way that kept me to just going with the natural process of things. And it kind of just showed me like the baby's okay, even if no one is telling me that the baby is okay. And then when that labor started spontaneously on its own, I kept waiting for it to get horrible. And I kept waiting for it to get intense. And it never did. And then all of a sudden I was at the hospital. They were like, hey, you'll probably push in a few minutes. And I was like, I'm going to push now. And baby came out. Never got to the same degree. So in a way, it's almost like having this super painful experience made the regular experience so manageable. And that's just such a common story with so many women is they have that traumatic experience and then they go for like the totally natural 100% pretty much undisturbed birth, and they're like, that was not bad. So what the fuck happened last time? Like what was all that before? So yeah, it's really crazy just thinking about the experiences that, I mean, if you think about the fact that 99% of women are birthing in the hospital, you're getting like, I mean, even just being there, and I don't like to totally just like, harp on hospital birth, but I've learned just through my own experiences and then through my research that if you want a natural birth, you need to learn about physiological birth, because those are not the same thing. But physiological birth is the best path to natural birth. But physiological birth really, in this day and age, cannot happen at the hospital.
So can you explain like what it is and like why it's not gonna?
Yeah. So physiological birth is essentially the process of allowing your body to do exactly what it is meant to do. So where natural birth is like you just don't have drugs, you give birth vaginally, you push the baby out, no drugs are included in the process. Physiological birth is like a step further where you're completely undisturbed, because every single disturbance, like even just hearing someone in the background, interrupts the process, because there's all of these hormones that are happening in your body. There's all these things happening. There's all this communication between you and baby. There's all this communication between like your uterus and your brain. And in order to get the hormones that were created to facilitate birth, which is like especially oxytocin is a huge one, melatonin is a big one, all the endorphins that come up, those get interrupted every single time adrenaline is initiated, because adrenaline and oxytocin are opposites. They're not friends. So when you're in the hospital and you have the fetal monitoring going on and you have that little, graph that you're looking at constantly, you have the time. I mean, anything that initiates your frontal cortex totally disrupts the process of birth. Mm-hmm. And so if you're being checked on every 15 minutes, which is typically hospital policy, you're having people get you on your back. You're not able to move the way your body needs to move. I mean, like eventually they just sit you in the bed, they strap you to everything, and then you can't move at all. So that entire process disrupts it, initiates the adrenaline, gets rid of the oxytocin, and then all of a sudden, all your blood is going from your uterus into your arms and your legs, because your body's like, I got to get out of here. They're not letting me birth. And then the whole process gets disrupted. And then that's where you get those really long labors. That's where you get the really painful labor, because without healthy blood flow to the uterus, you don't have that cushion and that warmth keeping the pain at bay. You're not getting the endorphins to that area to really, push back some of the pain. So that's really the big difference between the two, and why, like, I understand and I can empathize. And I myself have been in the position of saying, I have to be in the hospital to birth. And I would never tell a woman not to do that if she truly believes that that's where she's going to feel the safest. Like, if there's all these fears in your head that you cannot get rid of and you really need that monitoring, you might need to be at the hospital. That might be best for you. And, the best advice I'd have is labor at home as long as possible. But if you're really wanting a natural birth, you need to learn about physiological birth. Like, you should know what's happening in your body, and you should know what it takes to facilitate that.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, like, I took when, like, I just wanted to be totally undisturbed, was I knew that in hospital I wouldn't be able to birth how I wanted to. Like, I got there and it's like my birth literally stopped, and it made me think, like, when animals are in the wild, they can literally stop birth. Like, run, and then stop birth. Right. And I was like, that is literally like what happened. And there's no way, like, I think it goes two ways. You either get people who go, there's no fucking way you will ever get me in a hospital again, which is the way I've gone, like, get back.
Yeah.
Don't come.
I'm there now.
Whatever. If there's something wrong, we'll ring the paramedics. And this sounds very archaic in a way. Like, I think if something's wrong because your intuition is so strong. B, like, if that's what the plan is, God's plan, I'm just kind of like, that's his plan. I'm trying to make the best choice that's most in alignment for me. And if something went wrong, which sounds really bad, and I'm sure, it's a weird topic. People probably think I'm heartless, but whatever. And then,
but to that though, I mean, well, I do want to say, there is, that's the big mentality, is that if you choose to birth at home, especially unassisted, you don't care if your baby dies. That's the whole idea, is that you just don't care about it.
But it's not true. Like, it's...
Yeah. And no one's going to care about the life of that child more than the mother. That's like, I'm literally feeling my baby move right now. I can't not think about them, like, I can't not be attached to them. We're sharing blood right now. There's no way anyone's going to care more about them. Like, their DNA is imprinted in my brain forever. No one's going to care about them more than I do. And also, just the very idea of death is personal. And the way that you respond to it is personal. And I know, like, for me, that was a huge fear of mine. I mean, like, seriously, for the longest time, since I was like a little kid and I first learned what death was, I have had like regular panic attacks, at least on a weekly basis, just thinking about death. And then I discovered free birth, and I actually had to face my mortality. I kind of had to say, like, not that I want to die or that dying is better than birthing in the hospital. Of course, if I knew I could save my life, I would go to the hospital. Obviously, if I knew I could save my baby's life, I would go to the hospital. But also, there are instances, even at the hospital, where no one can be saved. There are instances where you cannot be saved. People still die at the hospital. Babies still die at the hospital. And it is a tragic reality that comes with getting pregnant. If you don't want your baby to die and you don't want to die, don't get pregnant, basically. Not that it's going to be a given, but it is always the risk of being pregnant. And I think that that's where we sort of get into this really weird social pull where there are some people that are afraid of death, and that's okay. That's okay to be afraid of death, and it's okay to take action on that. And then there are some people that are either learning to or have learned how to accept death as a possibility and not allow that to dictate their choices, and who would almost prefer. Like, I know if I knew for a fact that my baby was going to be stillborn or that my baby was going to die as soon as they were born, if I knew that for a fact, I would probably want to stay home because I would want to hold them.
Yeah.
I would want to have my time with them. And that's just a difference of opinion. It's not going to change the outcome. It's not going to change the experience and the tragedy and the pain. It's just a difference of opinion. And I think that's where like the respect of what works for you doesn't work for me really needs to come into play. And, and that's where for people that are interested in free birth, that are interested in home birth, like, no, it's not selfish and it's not crazy and it's not cold to want to honor death just as much as you want to honor life.
Yeah.
So, I interrupted you a little bit, but I do.
It wasn't as profound as that. It definitely wasn't as profound as that. It was just saying like you will either have this experience after you've had like a shitty birth in hospital induction, or then you might go to like an elective C-section because you just do not want anything to go wrong because you had such a shit time last time, which I also completely understand because you have to do what sits right with you. But I guess it's where you start to move towards like maybe not going with the narrative, maybe doing something a bit like a free birth or a home birth. Everyone has their opinions, and it's like it doesn't end because the minute you have the kid, they got their opinions, all of this stuff. It's
it actually only, like, I don't like to say this often, but as far as other people's opinions about what you're doing, it only gets worse after you give birth. That is a real thing. Like, most situations don't have to get worse, but other people's opinions on what you're doing will definitely get worse. So if you can't handle it in pregnancy, buckle up because it's lifelong. So because it's either going to be other people commenting on your parenting or commenting on your children and how they're doing things, or then eventually your kids are going to grow up and they're going to comment on how you parented them, and then you're going to have
traumatize them.
Exactly. So it's just, everyone's going to have something to say about what you're doing wrong. So just get used to it.
Yeah, it's the I'm waiting for like when she's 21 and she's like, Mom, like, you traumatized me because she's been to like therapy and whatever. I'll be like, sorry.
Yeah, what can you do? I know. Well, I know. I think that every time I have like some realization with my parents, I'm like, oh, well, you guys did this to me. And then I'm like, oh, okay, but then my kids are gonna say that to me one day, and how am I gonna handle it? So, it's all a part of the cycle of life. We're all just messing each other up one day or another.
And in the same time, like, it is like you have huge reverence for your own parents because you're like, shit, like I am I am trying to raise a human, and it's like, oh, like I'm not even settled in my own place and where I'm ending up. And then so motherhood is nothing but like, I think it's probably the most hard journey you can go on. I would obviously say that because I am one, but there's nothing compares to it really.
Yeah, It's very true. And it's kind of like what you were saying before we started recording about surrendering. And I think that's why birth matters so much,
Mm-hmm.
because to surrender to birth, which is totally out of your control. I mean, like, you
Mm-hmm.
can control where you birth for the most part, unless something,
Yeah.
unless nature intends something else. But for the most part, you can control how you birth, who's there, all that. But once the sensation starts, I mean, there are women who have given birth 10 times, and their ninth birth is the worst one, where they are just like totally out of control and they can't handle it. And you would think that they would know what's happening at this point. But when you can surrender to that, and you can say, I'm not going to try and push away the pain, I'm not going to try and control the pain, I'm not going to try and like run away from it, but I'm just going to surrender to the intensity
Yeah.
of labor and contractions and birth. I think that there's a reason for that, and I think it's because the intensity of having your child on the outside of your body is that every single day. It's like, I mean, obviously you'll have some good days and some bad days, but as soon as the baby is outside, there's nothing you can do. Like, you can't just, they're going to walk away from you eventually, and they're going to live their life, and you're going to have to surrender to that. You're going to have to surrender to the opinions. You're going to have to surrender to the ups and downs. I mean, when, throughout pregnancy, I'll get more hungry sometimes because the baby's going through a growth spurt, and I'll have to lay down for a day or two. But that doesn't compare to my 3-year-old going through a growth spurt, asking me for food every 5 minutes, like screaming at me every 5 minutes, something along the lines of those things, not sleeping as well that night. So I just think that it all plays together so intentionally. And I think the big reason motherhood has become so heavy is because we're in this place right now where we're not surrendering to birth. I mean, like 70% of women get an epidural. I've had an epidural, so it's not like a judgment on anyone. I understand what it feels like to just want to get away from it and to not deal with it. But you can't escape the intensity of birth. It will come back around either emotionally, it'll come back around physically, or if you're living your life avoiding pain, just in general, your kids are going to remind you of that every day. And I see that a lot, especially in adult relationships, when you have a child that's grown up and you have them that start to realize what they went through and how they were affected by their parents' choice to run away from pain. And you can't escape it, because then eventually that's going to affect everything in your life. And and it's going to rub off on your kids as well. Like, they're going to also take on that pain of not being able to face the intensity of life just in general. So
Yeah. We definitely think as parents, we're doing the right thing. And I'm not saying don't protect your kids and like shove them into the face of danger.
right.
Like, we don't want them to suffer at all. And like, this is different between crying it out, for example. Like, I'm not an advocate of that. Like, if she's crying, you get it. But it's like,
Right.
we have to teach them that pain is part of reality, and that does start with us. The biggest thing is not even what we say, not even what we do, like who we really are. I'm curious, just to like swing direction, on your thoughts postpartum, because for a lot of women, postpartum is it shouldn't be, but it's everyone goes, oh my God, fourth trimester, it's horrendous. And I look back at mine, I think I know all the mistakes I made, even though I had known that I wanted like meals prepared. I'd known that I wanted to be looked after. Like, actual ability to ask for that was really hard. And it ended up being a complete shit show. Because I don't know how to ask for help, which is I'm learning. But do you want to talk like more about postpartum? Because I think that period is the period that nobody is caring for mums, or babies getting cared for. No one's caring for the mum, and that's a recipe for complete disaster.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that go into this, like so many. I mean, first you have the whole fact that most people don't live close to their family. Most people have friends, but it's like, I feel like even in friendships at this point, it's not like you're like sisters or something. You're not like that close. It's not that common. So I think the first thing is that we're all just so spread apart that you just literally don't have the people there. And not everyone, most people probably can't afford to just pay someone to like wait on them hand and foot for 40 days. So, and then like our partners have to go to work. Like they still have to provide money while we're healing and while we're going through that. So I think that's part of it. I also think that the other part of it is, there's so many things. I mean, there's also that it's pretty common for women, especially, but just for people in general to not feel comfortable asking for help. And I know like when I've visited friends postpartum, like I'll want to help them and I will have no idea how. And it's hard to like take ownership over someone else's space and just say, okay, well, whatever to you, I'm just going to go through your laundry and fold it. Like you can't just do that to someone that's saying, no, it's fine, I can handle it. So I think there is kind of that piece where we have a hard time allowing the help to happen. And then we also have a hard time asking for help. And then other people have a hard time taking ownership over our space enough to be able to like know how to help. So I think that's definitely a piece of it. And I mean, a big thing, I have like a postpartum guide that basically helps women plan their whole postpartum. And a huge part of that is choosing who's going to be in your home and who's not. And like for as long as you want postpartum to be, because 40 days personally, I don't think is the whole thing. I mean, I think postpartum, I think postpartum can last up to 2 years minimum, really. And when you invite people into your home just so they can hold baby or just so they can like see baby, it's a huge disservice to you, because you also have to realize like your frontal cortex shuts down in birth. It really starts to shut down towards the end of pregnancy, and it doesn't come back for a few weeks or a few months after birth. So you're literally all in emotion like the whole time. And I don't think, that's why I love learning about how our bodies work, because I don't think we understand that the emotions we're feeling, like they are running the show at that point. And they just are, because our brain has to adjust to this new baby that we now have to protect. So everything has to like, come together, and we have to make more room to take on this other person. So I think when you realize that, you can start to say, okay, well, who do I trust to care for me when I literally, physically, mentally cannot care for anything but this baby? And that's where I think we can really help ourselves, is by, I always say like the biggest thing I'm doing for myself to prepare for birth and postpartum is working on my relationships. I mean, I've been relentless. Any level of conflict whatsoever that comes up with me and my husband, I'm like, this is going to get worked out, because if it doesn't, and I feel awkward around you in birth, you can't be there. So like, I can't have that adrenaline coming up just because I feel awkward about something we haven't resolved. And like, I'm going to have my mom come in and help. And my parents bought an Airstream to like keep in our yard so they can, come and go as they need to. So that'll be fun. But, with both my mom and my dad, I've had to talk to them and say, look, like, if there's any issues for us to work out, we need to work through it now. Which has been really amazing, because it's helped me to actually become closer to these people. But I think it's so easy for us to avoid conflict. So then who do we have in our life that we can invite in our most vulnerable moments? If we're avoiding conflict, if we're avoiding setting boundaries with our mother, we're avoiding giving our dad a hard time about something annoying he did, if we're avoiding, having conflict with our partners, how can we truly rely on them to to be there for us. So yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to preparing for postpartum and making it something that isn't a nightmare. That's for sure. And I think if I could sum it up to like 3 big points, I think one, understanding what's happening in your body and making your support team aware of that. Like for my second postpartum, I definitely had postpartum depression. I didn't realize it until after the fact. And it was, it was, it was really hard. I mean, I had days where, you know, you see posts where people are like, oh, postpartum depression doesn't mean you don't love your baby. And sometimes that's not true. Sometimes having postpartum depression means that you want someone else to take your baby away and you feel like it was a mistake. And you just go through that. And then you have to live with that guilt and you have to sit with that. And I know during that time, neither me nor my husband understood anything about what was going on postpartum. And so he didn't really even know that just making food every once in a while, just doing the laundry every once in a while wasn't enough. Like that emotional support, having people who know you well enough to look at you and who know the process of postpartum well enough to look at you and say, something's not right. I need to step in even more so. You know, so really understanding what's going on postpartum in your body and getting everyone aware of that is like the first step, I would say. And then the second step is making sure that you know exactly who you're comfortable with and who you're not, and being relentless with everyone about who is not welcome in your home. Because I heard too many stories about people that are like, oh, well, my mother-in-law came and she didn't help with anything and she made me feel really bad. And then my husband didn't help with that either. And I'm like, okay, but you know, those moments are going to impact you for a very long time. They're going to impact your relationship. So it's actually better for your relationships to not invite people in that you don't want there, even if it's your mom, even if it's your dad, even if it's your sister, even if it's your husband's mom, it doesn't matter. Don't invite them until you know for a fact you can handle it. And then with the people that you do feel comfortable with, the third thing is get everything out in the open so you can actually trust them and rely on them, and they can actually feel safe enough and comfortable enough with you to step in and help, even when you don't know how to ask for it. So
that's helpful. So everyone should go and get your guide then, ready?
Yes.
Do you want to tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you?
Yes. So it's just on Instagram, Your Wild Birth. That's the whole thing. I am working on a website, which I'm very excited about. It's just going to be yourwildbirth.com. And I mean, for now, through my Instagram, you can get all the updates. I have guides that you can download on pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. They're pay what you want. So it's really whatever your budget. I just want the information out there. I want you to just have it. And yeah, and I'll be posting updates on the mentorship that I'm hoping to start in 2023. So that'll be all birth, pregnancy, postpartum related. So that'll be fun.
Exciting.
Yes.
Well, listen, thank you for coming on, and I'm wishing you well in your birth. I'll be curious to see how it goes and your last few weeks in pregnancy.
Yes, I'm taking it easy for a while, so it'll be
definitely do.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Bless you. Well, take care. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's fun to be back. It's fun to, it's just so interesting how our paths have just paralleled.
Yeah, there's something.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah.